For many kids, Christmas would be the happiest day of the year. But there are a lot of people, and maybe for some of us here, Christmas can easily turn to be the most sorrowful time of the year. It's the season to be gloomy for some of us, especially if you're away from your families and you're away from your loved ones, or perhaps you're living alone, perhaps you just survive a bad breakup, for example. You would think that Christmas is no longer the wonderful time, the most wonderful time of the year, but really the most sorrowful time. And we can easily find ourselves wallowing in sadness and in self-pity, in the midst of all the festivities that is happening around us. So instead of laughter and singing, we find ourselves sulking and crying and just staring at that Facebook page. And some of us, we get pretty grumpy on Christmas. And, the sight and the sound of Christmas just drives us nuts. So instead of spreading holiday cheer, there are a lot of people who find themselves looking like and sounding like the classic character, the annoying and the bitter character out of Dr. Seuss' book, The Grinch. The Grinch, if you remember, and you know what I'm talking about here, it turned into a movie, a musical, all kinds of things. But Mr. Grinch is this devious, anti-holiday spirit, a cave-dwelling creature who, according to the book, the heart is actually 2 sizes smaller than the average heart. And he lives on top of this mountain, on a 3,000-foot mountain called Mount Crumpit. And from where he lives, he's got a view of the city, this village called Whoville, W-H-O and then Ville. The Whos are the people who live in this area, and it's a home of merry and warm-hearted people, and they love celebrating Christmas. And Mr. Grinch would sit in his cave, hearing all the noise and the lights and the fireworks, and he gets annoyed by that. And he decided one day that he would dress up as Santa Claus and come down and get everybody's gifts and everybody's ham and stockings and everything about Christmas and the decors and everything. He steals all that, thinking that somehow he will prevent Christmas from happening. I think you would agree that we live in a Grinchy kind of world. That's something I made up. A Grinchy kind of world. It's a world that has joy and happiness in short supply. Isn't that the case? I mean, we live in a world full of sorrow, death, and despair. And we often hear sorrowful news. And we live in a world where there is a lot of reason for us to be sad about and to be sad for. And I think there are many of you here who can come up with a list and come up with the different reasons why you should be sad this Christmas. And there may be, there could be legitimate reasons why you could be sad this Christmas. Perhaps it's something to do with your personal situation. You haven't gotten your 13-month pay. I mean, I would be a Grinch all Christmas if that's the case. Or perhaps you just lost a job, or some financial need, or somebody gets sick in the family. That's always a bummer, right? It's Christmas time and you get flooded. I mean, with our kababayan in Mindanao. Or perhaps it's a conflict that is ongoing. It just escalated. This relationship, it was okay prior to Christmas, but with all the tension and the demand, suddenly it's a full-blown war. And you're wondering, boy, the Mr. Grinch got ahead of me on this one. I was just reading an article from BBC a couple of days ago. The IMF, the International Monetary Fund, issued this warning to the world. They said that the global economy for 2012 is gloomy. Yeah, what a way to spread holiday cheer to the world. Telling them that if we don't do anything, every single economy in the world will go bankrupt. But your Christmas does not need to be Grinchy. I made that up. Or even your whole life. It doesn't have to be depressing, miserable, gloomy, or even melancholic. I mean, we can have a happy, joyful Christmas. Only if we pay attention to the message of Christmas. It's a message of joy to all people. That's what the angel said to the shepherds. Here's the thing. God did something for you and me on Christmas Day. And we have every reason to be joyful. Not only this season, but for the rest of our life. The real joy of Christmas is not seasonal at all, but it is actually for eternity. Christmas reminds us that God brings joy to those who look to Him for salvation. Luke chapter 2, we are told here that Jesus was born at this particular time when this particular Caesar was reigning, and on this particular time when the governor Quirinius was also reigning in Syria. And here, Luke is helpful in putting us in its historical context, this particular period that Jesus was born. Just a little bit of history. There are a lot of misconceptions. They thought that Jesus was born in 1 AD or 1 BC, but most likely he was born in 3 or 4 BC, just before Herod died. So we're given this scenario, and we are told that there was this great census that Joseph had to go back to his hometown to be registered. And generally, 12 years old and above, you are taxed during that time. And on this particular occasion, they have to travel back to his hometown, bringing with him his new wife, his fiancée Mary at this time. The travel must have been hard. They ended up in this particular town where there's no longer any room available because of the census. People are flocking the city. Mary ended up having her baby, in the manger. Manger is really the feeding container for animals. But I would like to focus more on how this message of Christmas was revealed to the shepherds. And even here, before we get to that portion of Scripture, we would see that God's love, this joy, this salvation that God is announcing to the world is not only confined to the people of Israel. It's not only confined to a certain segment of society. It's not only meant for certain kinds of people in the world. It's not only meant for the religious and the pious or the wealthy, the nice. Unlike Santa Claus, come on, he has got his list of the naughty and the nice. If you get into the naughty list, I don't know how you move back and forth, but you get into the naughty list, you don't get anything. Not so with God. God's message of salvation, God's joy that is imparting to the world is for everyone. And how do we know this? God first revealed His message to the shepherds. Of all people, shepherds are only a rank higher to lepers. When you're a leper, you tell everybody you're a leper. I'm a leper, move out. You're a shepherd, you don't have to tell them, they stay away from you because you stink. I mean, you work and live with animals, you smell like one of them, right? Shepherds generally are not, are treated sort of, it's a menial kind of job, and not everybody wants to become a shepherd. It runs in the family, but when you're a shepherd, you're not exactly the kind of person who would end up in the royal guest list. You're not the kind of person who will be first invited and be told about this great, wonderful news of salvation that God finally has fulfilled His promise to David. But God did that anyway. Why? To tell us that His message is for everyone. Let's go back to the story here in verse 8, chapter 2 of Luke. The night there were shepherds staying in the fields nearby. It's very important for shepherds to stay with their animals, because of thieves and predators and all that. But in this particular occasion, they were watching over their sheep. In verse 9, suddenly an angel of the Lord appeared among them, And the standard response in the Bible for angelic appearance is always becoming fearful. You become afraid when you see somebody supernatural. And this is why the angel said, don't be afraid, don't be afraid. You know, for some of the Jews, an idea of an angel coming is always a lot of times connected with the idea of judgment. When God sends an angel, he sends it as an extension of his righteous rule to judge somebody. So, you get scared when you see an angel. But in this case, he said, hey, I'm not here with a sorrowful news. I'm here to give you a good news. The angel says, I bring you good news that will bring great joy to all people. Nowadays, a lot of TV stations have segments that they have some, I forgot what particular station, they have segments that says this is purely good news. It's all positive. They're not going to report any crime or anything like that. It's always good news. Why? Because, they want to temper a little bit the bad things that they're always reporting. But in this particular case, in order to understand why this is such a good news, we need to know what the bad news is. The bad news is the world is separated from God because of sin. The bad news is the world is darkened by sin. The bad news is the world is awaiting God's judgment. The bad news is this world is wrapped in pain, sorrow, and misery. The bad news for the Jews back then is they're stuck with a foreign master. So the angel comes and says, God is here. Good news. God is here. Well, it's true. He has sort of abandoned you. It feels like he's been gone and away for a journey or whatever. But guess what? Tonight, God is here. God is here in the person of Jesus. Tonight, God is fulfilling his promises. Tonight, God is going to make Israel's hope a reality. Tonight, salvation has begun. Among ancient Jews, they've been hoping, praying, longing, asking God repeatedly, God, when are you going to come and bring a deliverer? When is this Messiah going to rule and reign? When is he come down from heaven? God, when are you coming down to rescue us? When, God? And the angels giving them this scoop. Hey, here's this heavenly scoop. God is here. God is here. That's the good news. God is here in the person of Jesus to deal with the issue of sin, to offer us salvation, and to give each one of us here real and lasting joy in their life.